This is your Tuesday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. It is Tuesday Morning Nickelback time. Football. Talking Vikings, Gophers. Got some great stuff coming up. Andrew Kramer with his film review here in just a minute. Kind of dissecting just how Cleveland was able to pick apart a Vikings offense that had been humming for 3 weeks, 2 at least, stopping them, holding them to only 7 points in the Vikings' 14-7 loss on Sunday. We'll do my least favorite team as my favorite team. Back to least favorite with Keith Richotte. Again, we'll talk some offensive line in that context. We'll talk about, wish they would have known that they needed to fix this, because a problem is not fixed if you can't count on it every single time. And we'll talk Gophers with Randy Johnson. Big story emerging. Trey Potts left behind in Indiana, hospitalized with an unspecified ailment. Maybe we'll have an update on that as well. So let's get right into it, should we? It's film review time. Andrew Kramer joins Daily Delivery, does a great job writing about the Vikings for the Star Tribune. Was at US Bank Stadium on Sunday. Didn't see a lot of offense from the Vikings, Andrew. They marched down the field on that first drive. Looks like it's going to be kind of a repeat of Seattle, maybe, because the offense is clicking on that first drive, and then 0 points for the last 3.5 quarters. So I want to get into, with film review today, like what happened? How was Cleveland able to shut down what had been a very productive offense and looked like it was on track to do that again on Sunday?
Yeah, because the Vikings had succeeded, really, when you went back and looked at their first 3 games. I know Cincinnati was a roller coaster ride, but Arizona, Kirk did well against Chandler Jones in a pass rush that had been stout the week prior. The Browns, coming off a 9-sack game in Chicago, much like the Cardinals were coming off their big game the week prior. It's just their plans fell apart. The Vikings did a lot of the similar stuff they typically tried to do in those first 3 games, but everything fell apart, whether it was the screen game. The first 2 times Clint Kubiak called a screen on Sunday were the first 2 times the Browns dropped into a single high safety and basically just ate it up right away. And those are the kind of things where it's either the defense seeing what you're going to do and making that pre-snap adjustment to drop into that, or you just have bad luck. Either way, it didn't work out for the Vikings. You saw a lot of the extra pass pro stuff where you got Conklin, CJ Ham staying in to block and chip, and Myles Garrett splitting it. Myles Garrett at one point split a triple team to get his half a sack. Basically, CJ Ham was on one side, Ezra Cleveland was on the other, Rashad Hill was in the middle, and Myles Garrett was still able to get that sack. It was just an all-out dominant performance by the Browns defensive line. And I saw a quote today on Monday. A Browns safety said, "You see guys just mauling people off the ball. Offensive linemen are on the ground. It's just awesome." And that's really all you have to say.
So, with that in mind, I mean, not every team is the Browns. I think they have an exceptional front four, probably one of the best in football, and they've got a pretty nice team. If Baker Mayfield could find a smidgen of accuracy, they might be particularly dangerous. But how much of this do we chalk up to this is how good Cleveland is, versus how much do we say, well, the Vikings have had problems like this against teams like this all the time, basically, especially during the Kirk Cousins era, where Cousins gets pressured. As the game goes on, he kind of starts thinking about that pressure. And we've seen it against Chicago, some other teams. Like, how much of it is on Cleveland and how much of it is on the Vikings and the line and Kirk Cousins?
Yeah, I think what we need to see, and if you're a Vikings fan, you want to be seeing Clint Kubiak and this offense adjust much quicker than they did in that game. And you want to see them adjust moving forward when they perhaps anticipate we're going to get our butts whooped up front. You need to see that. You need to know going into it, we're going to do this. And clearly the 7-man max pass protection stuff, that's not just some magic pill you can take, because you're going to have Myles Garrett blowing things up like he did, even when you still did that. I liked some of the misdirection stuff they did earlier in the ball game. You had KJ Osborne taking an end around for a 10-yard pickup. That's not stuff you can do every single play, but they basically just went away from it and said, we're going to keep trying to establish the run and set up this play action boot game that led to Kirk's first interception. I just think they didn't have the pivot to that in a way that you would have thought going through a week of practice, you would assume they would have known we're not going to win a lot of these matchups up front. Instead, you still had Tyler Conklin doing a lot of the blocking on Myles Garrett. And that was a matchup they lost almost every single time. And Richotte Hill was not much better. That was probably his worst game as a Viking that certainly I can remember. So I do think a lot of it is the fact that you're playing against a potential defensive player of the year candidate in Myles Garrett. But at the same time, this isn't the only time. Brian O'Neill said this today, talking to local media and saying that we're going to face these kind of guys a lot. You're going to see Chandler Jones. You're going to see Khalil Mack when Chicago comes up. You're going to see Joey Bosa with the Chargers. You need to figure out a way to pivot because these matchups are not just all of a sudden going to be won, even when you get a rookie left tackle coming in there.
Yeah, a particular play maybe we can talk about a little bit. It was third down in the third quarter. I think you were communicating this to me, and I remember the play now. KJ Osborne pretty wide open, deep. It's maybe he's got a shot to take, but the pressure is coming, and instead of kind of trying to hang in there for that extra half measure and make that throw and take that hit, he's kind of ducking pretty quick, ends up taking the sack, and that's that. And that's, again, pressure on a quarterback, that it's a cumulative thing. What stands out to you about that particular play?
Yeah, and that came in a key moment in the game. If you remember, that was right after the Browns had scored 11 points just before halftime. They come out in the second half, they get the ball. You're thinking, boy, this could go even farther downhill. And the Vikings get a stop. The defense actually stops them. It's a 3-and-out. Huge moment for the offense. And what happens? They reach a 3rd and 3. This is manageable. This is exactly what you're looking for if you're the Vikings. All the excuses about, we get stuck in third long all day. No, this was a manageable 3rd and 3. And what you get is Kirk Cousins getting some pressure, but albeit not the most intense pressure he faced that day. It was mild compared to the stuff he was facing, where Myles Garrett looks like something out of Jurassic Park coming through. This was mild. You had your blockers still in front of you. You just felt the back of Oli Udoh coming into you, the back of Richotte Hill, and Kirk tucks the ball when he's looking right at a wide open KJ Osborne. The Browns secondary played very well, but there was a botched coverage that led to KJ just streaking wide open down the field as 3 guys went with Adam Thielen underneath. And Kirk missed it. He tucks the ball, he runs. It ends up being a sack on 3rd down. They punt. And that's the story of kind of how that second half went, where you were given some chances and the offense just needed to sustain something, and they couldn't. And in Kirk, you say the cumulative stuff. That's totally a thing, because this came in the third quarter. This came after a first half in which he was facing those dinosaurs on the other side of the ball. And you could tell by that second half, his reads were off. He was a little, gun shy, as they say. He was just hesitant. And so there was one time too in the second half later where it was a tip ball, should have been intercepted, but it was dropped. And Kirk forces it to Tyler Conklin when Adam is actually wide open on a similar out route on the same side of the field. It's just, those are the decisions that Kirk doesn't typically make when he's like this, but that pressure really started to affect his decision making.
Well, and I'm looking at Pro Football Focus. Looks like 22 out of his 41 dropbacks, he was pressured. That's over 50%. That was the most in the league, at least through the Sunday night game. I don't know about the Monday night game, but it's again, some of that's probably on him. He holds the ball sometimes, but some of it is this recurring problem of the offensive line. And it's, as we've talked about it, it's not fixed if you can't count on it, essentially. And that feels like they can't count on it. So as we think about it going forward, like, is there a counter adjustment they can now make against a front four like this? Again, if they're going against Chicago or somebody who has a real disruptor, or is this just life with Kirk Cousins and an offensive line in flux?
Yeah, they need the offensive line to be a lot better. This isn't, you don't want to put too much of it on coaching, because they do need to make some adjustments there, but you need Brian O'Neill to play up to a top 5 level right tackle like he did in some of these games early. He didn't do that on Sunday. He was missing blocks as well. You had missed assignments in the running game where Ezra Cleveland's pulling and he's not hitting the right guy. You have Oli Udoh pulling and he just doesn't look good doing that. And you get Alexander Madison outrunning him, and that sets off the timing of a run play. There's so many things that players can do better that can make that improvement. The problem with Kirk, and that we continually run into, is that people are human. This is a mediocre offensive line. They are going to make mistakes, and you don't have that quarterback that can overcome that, especially when you are the talent gap between your opposing defensive line and your offense is so far like it was in that Cleveland game. And it was in Tampa Bay last year, and it was in Indianapolis as well, and Chicago in the past. Like, we just keep seeing the same movie play out. And that's the problem, is when you're not perfect up front, you need somebody to overcome that. And Kirk just wasn't that guy on Sunday.
No, and that's just not really his MO. And so you run into these games where you can almost predict how it's going to go, how it's going to happen. And that's problematic in year 4 of Kirk Cousins as the Vikings quarterback. Well, we'll see if they have any more luck next week against Detroit. Probably not the same level of front four they're playing there, but Detroit, for being an 0-4 team, maybe isn't quite the laughing stock that I imagined they would be. That's not like a walkover automatic victory.
Yeah, I'll just quickly say you're right about that. This is not Matt Patricia's Detroit Lions, but the Lions did just lose their best pass rusher to an Achilles injury, and then they lost their center, who's not expected to play, Frank Ragnow, a Minnesota native, who's one of their best offensive linemen. So I think the Vikings are due. This is like a classic rebound game for the Vikings, but I just don't know how much we're really going to learn about them in this game.
Sounds good, Andrew. Appreciate it. We'll do this again next week.
Thanks again, Mike.
Andrew does a great job breaking down the film every week, both on this podcast and on Star Tribune, StarTribune.com. Look for his full film review on Tuesday, even if you want to avert your eyes, because it will not be pretty for the Vikings offense.
Since I was a kid, my grandpa, Jim Warner, taught us to treat our customers like family. And to thank you for 67 years, Warner Stellian is offering unbeatable appliance savings. Go to WarnerStellian.com to get your $50 coupon you won't find anywhere else.
Let us continue now with Tuesday Morning Nickelback on Daily Delivery. Welcome in Keith Richotte. My least favorite team is my favorite team. I thought we had something going here, man. I thought we were going to be, talking about how this team. No, I didn't. I didn't really think that. I didn't really think they were going to have a sustained winning streak. I thought they could beat the Browns, but they are right back now to being probably your least favorite team, and probably in addition to losing 14-7 on Sunday. It was like a 60-minute sleeping pill. It was not a fun game to watch at all.
Michael Rand of the Star Tribune.
That's me.
I just wish that there would have been, we've talked about this before.
Yes.
If only there had been one member, just even one member of the Twin Cities media, just courageous enough to stand up and say, I think that offensive line might be a problem for this team.
A skeptic in somewhere out there.
If just one person would have taken up the charge of noting how awful this offensive line is and how utterly atrocious and wrong it is that they haven't been able to fix this. Just one time.
I wish I knew one. I wish that there was one sitting in my chair right now talking to you. Yeah, we were worried about the offensive line. They played better for 2 games. For 2 games, they were pretty good against Arizona, and they were pretty good against Seattle. And Seattle had all sorts of gaping holes in their defense, and it probably made things look better than they really were. But it's not fixed if you can't count on it, right? I mean, from week to week, you still don't know what this line is going to do. And on Sunday, they couldn't protect Kirk Cousins, and Cleveland was getting pressure with 4 guys all day. And that's a recipe for disaster, especially against Cousins, who, when he's pressured, when he starts to feel that, he doesn't get the ball out to the right places. Sometimes he panics. He starts gets sped up a little bit, and then the whole day unravels.
I've even thought about, should I just set up literally plexiglass around where I sit?
So I'm watching that game.
Yep.
And there was a lot that was clearly frustrating about it. And there was a lot that exposed the weaknesses that we've talked about, a lot of things that just didn't look very good. And it was so strange. it was so strange to think about how the defense only gave up 14 points, yet somehow still looked awful, right? And if it weren't for the fact that Baker Mayfield is not a very good quarterback.
No, he missed so many throws.
You put Kirk Cousins on that team, and you might actually have a Super Bowl team then, right? That's the ideal situation for somebody like that. So the defense looked bad, right? They couldn't generate a lot of offense. Just a lot of it just looked sloppy and bad penalties, just bad penalties at the wrong time. But despite all of that, the thing that killed them was that terrible offensive line. And there was parades in the streets, there were celebrations, the fireworks were going off because for 2 weeks the offensive line was adequate, right? That not necessarily good, but certainly
good enough. Good.
And so everybody was so happy, and the offense flourished when they actually performed at a standard level of decency. But they're not good enough, and they had a tough challenge. I concede that. I recognize that, but they are the ones that lost the game for this team.
Yeah, and it all goes hand in hand, right? I mean, the two games that they've looked the worst in, where they, against Cincinnati, they could have won that game still and probably should have won that game based on how it finished. But the two games where the offensive line has really struggled, where Kirk Cousins hasn't had the time to throw, they have those are their two worst games easily of the year. So they are going to go as their offensive line goes. And like I said, they're not going to be poor all season. There's going to be games where the scheme works or whatever they're trying to do against the other team makes them look better, or they just happen to play better that day. But again, a problem is not fixed when you don't know when it's going to become a problem again. So there you go with that. And you're right about the defense. I think they did some good things on, they got off the field on third down a few times, but yeah, Baker Mayfield was terrible. Like he had multiple plays where he could have put the game away and not given the Vikings chance after chance to either go ahead or tie. And I like the rumor you just started: Kirk Cousins to Cleveland, Baker Mayfield to the Vikings. Did you start that rumor or did I?
I think that the Daily Delivery podcast started that rumor.
The collective.
Yeah. But let me ask you this, right? Okay. Right. Because I was surprised at the end of this game at how little I was disappointed with the loss in the sense that I felt like they were just beaten by a better team.
Yes.
And so, there's nothing you can really do about. They were just beaten by a better team. And so here are the Vikings, right? And we talked about before, we've said it a million times now, or probably closer to 6, because I think that's as many times.
Somewhere between 6 and a million.
Right. We talk about how if they had 7 things go right, they actually might have a really nice season. Clearly, that is not going to happen. They at any given time, they get 4 and maybe win a game. They are not going to get all 7. They're not going to get all 7 all season long, right? So here's a team that just lost to a team that is better than them, that sure is a playoff team, but that one that you don't expect to see represent the AFC in the Super Bowl. Okay. So they're beaten by a good, not great team. They are 1-3, right? What are the expectations for this team for the rest of the year? Because it's clearly not Super Bowl, right? And
I don't think so. There's at least 4 teams. There's at least 4 teams that even talent-wise are just better than they are.
Right. And so what can or should be the expectations for this team for the rest of the year? Because you've got 3 quarters of the season left. What should any of us as fans want or expect? Because it's not going to be the Super Bowl, right? And the playoffs are looking less and less like even a possibility. They are wasting Kirk Cousins' career year, and he has not been those 2 interceptions aside, he has not been anywhere near the problem, right? So what do you root for? What do you aspire to in a year like this?
I mean, you aspire to, I think you look for signs of tangible progress. you still, the season's not over. They're 1-3. So if you're a fan who just like wants to see them finally someday, win the Super Bowl, which means getting into the playoffs, you want to see them win these next 2 games, right? I mean, they're playing to Detroit. Detroit's not a layup, by the way. Detroit is bad, but I think this team is capable of losing to anybody right now.
And what proof do you have of that?
I don't know. Week 1 against the Bengals. I don't know. Detroit has played some decent halves of football. They were actually up on Green Bay at halftime. They probably should have beaten Baltimore if not for a 66-yard field goal a couple weeks ago. They're not good, but I don't think they're quite the laughing stock that we expected them to be. They're not Houston. So, that's, they better win that game.
Can we just pause for a second? And I think that's all right. But I just want to acknowledge that their coach is still ridiculous.
He is, yeah. But they haven't given up on him yet because it's only week 5 coming up. So, but they better win that. Carolina's going to be a hard game. Carolina's been playing pretty well. Whether they're 3-1 now, I know they lost the other day, but I think they were 3-0 going into that game, and that's in Carolina, as I'm sure you know. So, that's a tall task. Like just getting to 3-3 at the bye is not easy. They're probably not going to be. I don't think they're close to being favored in that Carolina game if they beat Detroit. So then you come out of the bye, and I wrote about this online Monday. Like the schedule gets harder. Like they're going to be the underdog in at least in more than half of their last 13 games. This ridiculous 17 game season, and they only have 8 home games and 9 road games. Like the schedule does them no favors, and not winning some of those early games that they gave away to Cincinnati, that they could have beaten Arizona. Those are the kinds of margins that they can't exist in. So what do you hope for? I guess you hope that you hope that they're as good as that they think they are, and that they can get into the playoffs. And if they can get into the playoffs and they're as good as they think they are, maybe they have some upset potential in them, but that's the ceiling to me. The ceiling is kind of what they did in 2019, which is have a nice season, get into the playoffs, surprise somebody, and then get blown out by an obviously better team.
But
and I don't know if that's nothing to aspire to. It's fine. It's better than going 6-11. Like you don't want to just root openly for mediocrity or to be bad, because as much as they probably could use a reboot, you get into that cycle and you never know when you're going to get out of it. So
yeah, no, you and I are both on the anti-tanking bandwagon.
Right.
I'm not interested in that. I want to see the team win. But as we've also talked about, right, this is a team that really might need the reboot, really might need some change. Right? If the rumors are true, if the stories are true, that it finally took Mike Zimmer 4 years to sit down with his quarterback and watch some film, to sit down with the most important player on his team to finally watch some film, right? That if after 8 years of being a head coach, he was finally forced to acknowledge that there are other aspects of his team besides the defense, right? And have we reached the point where it is too late, where the lessons that he seems to maybe have finally sort of learned are too late? Like he's not destroying all of his kickers anymore. He's not, and so not to mention, right? I get that Kirk Cousins sucks up 137% of the salary cap.
Yeah, it's a lot.
But right, this is a team that also gathers as many draft picks as possible every single draft, yet has tremendous depth problems everywhere across the board. Right? Not even enough young, cheap talent to keep refreshing with some of this stuff. Right? And so even if there are these signs of progress, what does that mean at 1-3, right? If they sneak into the playoffs at 9-8, which again is just a dumb thing with 17 stupid game, right? And if they manage to keep themselves in the hunt graphic that we've been talking about before.
Yeah, we're gonna be week 16, 7-8 Vikings in the hunt still.
Oh,
third out of 4 teams in the hunt for that 7 spot.
And so, I mean, if they can crawl into a playoff spot yet again, is that actually the best for this team when this leadership structure is just it does not inspire any more confidence.
No, and that's probably a good place to finish. I mean, I think you're right. I don't think that
fire them all. That's where we should finish.
I don't think
fire them all.
I don't think that would be better. I can't I would still rather they go 9-8 than 6-11 or 5-12. But I think intellectually I would acknowledge that anything less than 11-6, where you're like, okay, this is a good team. This is a team that, yeah, they might go to the playoffs and get beat, but they had a chance. This was not just some fluke or some team that just kind of snuck in and, it wasn't really even a playoff spot. If they were that good and then lost in the playoffs, I could live with it. But so intellectually, I think I understand that 5 wins would be better than 9 wins in a marginal playoff berth. But yeah, but you're right. I don't know what they could do this year to say, wow, can't wait for 2022. Maybe it's the offensive line, miraculously playing well for an entire season. And then you're like, okay, well, maybe this does work, but this doesn't feel like that's happening. So I guess that's kind of the story of the season, right? There's, like we've talked about, all the things that need to go right. They keep playing whack-a-mole with all the things that have gone wrong. And in various games, something's going to crop up, and more often than not, probably it's going to cause a loss.
Whack-a-mole.
And it's like I wrote the other day, the Vikings keep saying they're good, but it also might not matter. The schedule is not going to get any easier for them as they go along. I counted 7 games at least that I thought they would be betting underdogs out of their final 13. 538.com has them not favored in their power rankings in 9 of the final 13 games. So there's a lot of toss-ups, a lot of games that are pretty close, so it's not like they can't get it done, but they're supposed to go at least 8-5 would be what you need to win 9 games at this point this season and have a realistic chance at sneaking into the playoffs. They're going to go 8-5 against a schedule where more than half the games they're underdogs. I don't know. It's going to be difficult, to say the least, after they kind of dug themselves this 1-3 hole.
Randy Johnson covers Gopher football, joins Daily Delivery now. Randy, we'll have to talk Gophers Purdue and the win they had 20-13. But before we get to the particulars of that game, we need to talk about Trey Potts, who we learned Monday afternoon. The U put out a release saying he had been hospitalized, was still in a hospital in Indiana, and had left the game at some point, late in the game. Didn't really seem like much had happened. Whatever, I'm sure most of what is in the story that you wrote, Star Tribune, StarTribune.com. But for our listeners, what else do we know at this point?
Well, we don't know a whole lot about it at this point. Basically, that they haven't given an exact situation, injury, illness, whatever. We do know that late in the fourth quarter, his last carry, he converted a third down and just went to the sideline as a player normally would. It wasn't like he was helped off the field or anything. Then evidently afterward, he was tended to by trainers and then taken by ambulance to a nearby hospital. Wasn't addressed post game. It was a situation where I didn't see it myself. I don't think anybody else that was recovering the game noticed it from the press box. It's on the opposite sideline, and the game was, pretty much in doubt at that point. The Gophers were going down for that field goal that put them up 20-13. Then Purdue was moving the ball on its last series before Tyler Newman sealed it with the interception.
Now, obviously, we'll await more updates. It sounds like the family might be providing some updates through the university at some point. Obviously, the football part of this is way down on the list. We want to make sure Trey Potts is healthy, he's okay. But if we can talk about the football piece of it for just a minute, he's become a very important player for them, obviously, since the Muhammad Ibrahim injury. He'd been running pretty well, had close to 600 yards already this year, something like that. How has he kind of stepped into that role, and how important is he to the team right now?
He's very important to the team. Yeah, he's fit that role almost seamlessly. I mean, he might not be quite the power runner that Muhammad Ibrahim was, but very effective for the Gophers. He had from his first start on that September 11th game against Miami, Ohio, through the next 3. He had led the nation in rushing in those 3 games. So I think it was about 440 yards. And so he'd become very important. On Saturday, Purdue had the ball most of the game. So the Trey didn't have to be the workhorse that he usually has. He led the team with 15 carries and 78 yards, and the third quarter touchdown that put him ahead for good. Basically, he handled the bulk of the load. Then Cole Kramer did some good work out of the Wildcat formation in running the ball. The backup running back Saturday was freshman Bucky Irving, who had 6 carries for 15 yards.
Well, we'll keep an eye on that. The Gophers have a bye week, like I said. So, and I think PJ Fleck had said, chance for guys to get healthy. A bye week is always big for that. So we'll see what develops with the Trey Potts story. Let's circle back on the game itself a little bit. 20-13 win. It was not. I don't think they're going to put that one in a museum. I don't know if that one's the one to put in the time capsule and say this is what American football is about in 2021. But a win is a win. In the rain, on the road, in the Big Ten. Finding a way to get it done. Tanner Morgan makes enough plays, maybe a week after I was fairly critical of him, and now he played one of the worst games he has played, and the running game is good, and they make enough plays on defense. What else did you see Saturday in West Lafayette? Yeah,
they cobbled a way to win the game. They cobbled it together, which was what they might have to do from now and again. Basically, they played very good defense, especially in the second half. Shut Purdue out. They kept David Bell, Purdue's star receiver, out of the end zone, which that's impressive to be able to do. And then the offense, their next to last possession, and they got the ball with 6:23 left and drained out most of the clock there, and made it force Purdue to use all 3 of its timeouts. So that was effective. They ended up the game in a big deficit in time of possession, but had about a minute more in the fourth quarter when it mattered most there. They did a little bit, and you can't forget the punting of Mark Crawford, who this week was named co-special teams player of the week in the Big Ten. Averaged 51.3 yards and had a couple of punts of 60. He pinned Purdue inside its 20 4 times, including once at the 2 and once at the 9. So the Boilers had to go a long way to get anything done.
If you're a field position enthusiast, Saturday was your day. But yeah, not the kind of thing that makes you remember a game, but important in a number of respects. They was coming off of the Bowling Green loss that we've talked about. We talked about last week. That was a big piece of the leading up to chatter. Like, how would this team respond to a loss like that? And it wasn't like they came out and won 35-0 or 30-0 like they did against Colorado. But a Big Ten road win is a Big Ten road win. It does not matter exactly what they look like.
Yeah, they'll take it. I mean, they were pretty happy about the outcome. Sure, you'd like style points if you can get them, but right now it's just get your wins and get your bowl eligibility at 6, and then go from there and see if you can string together a nice season in the Big Ten West. That's still technically still obviously Iowa is in control there.
Yeah, but that said, like you said, that division. I mean, Wisconsin looks just bad, I guess is probably the word to say. They got routed by Michigan. They've lost 3 times already this season, twice in the conference. Nebraska's kind of up and down. That's the next opponent, right? That's the game coming out of the bye. But then you've got a run there where you could see them, if they play reasonably well, they could go 3-1 at least in that stretch, right? And if not, maybe 4-0 if things break their way.
Yeah, it's going to be not an easy stretch per se, but easier than maybe the last few weeks that has Iowa in it. Nebraska, they've been turning it around pretty good lately. They smacked Northwestern 56-7. They lost in overtime to Michigan State, and they were within a touchdown against Oklahoma. So they've turned it around a bit there. So I don't think the Gophers can assume that's a win. They follow with Maryland here. Maryland didn't show much against Iowa on Friday, but they're a team with a lot of good athletes. Then they go to Northwestern, and then they have Illinois here before the 3-game finishing stretch of at Iowa, at Indiana, then Wisconsin.
Yeah, so it's possible to get that bowl eligibility before they hit that stretch, but we don't know what the future holds. Obviously, it's probably going to be chasing that Bowling Green loss for a while, because that's the real surprise of the season outcome wise so far. Last thought, Randy, bye week next week. Aside from getting Trey Potts healthy, managing that, anything that PJ Fleck has said about how they want to use this kind of downtime in the middle of the year?
I think they want to, they want to rest. They want to recuperate. I think they want to refine some things too. Fine tune the offense, get that thing going a bit better. I think getting the rest for Chris Autman-Bell will be imperative there. He'll be able to not have put any miles on that bad ankle. Basically, they need him to be as close to healthy as fully healthy as they can to get the offense going a bit better.
Sounds good, Randy. I'm not sure we'll check in next week since it's a bye week, but if there's news, maybe we will circle back. But for sure, in 2 weeks, enjoy a little bit of break as well if you get it, and we'll do this again down the road, all right?
Okay, sounds good, Mike. Thanks a lot.
Now, like Randy said, the Gophers are off this week. Then they start, the rest of their Big Ten schedule. Hope Randy gets a chance to explore another one of his loves this weekend, college hockey. Big series, by the way. Minnesota State hosting St. Cloud State in Mankato, 2-game series Friday and Saturday. Both teams undefeated, 2-0, number 1 against number 2 in the country. Fun early showdown. Maybe Randy can get over there and check that out, because I know he loves the college hockey. Let's finish with the cooler. The name of the segment of this show is Tuesday Morning Nickelback. Now, I've been sneaking song lyrics from Nickelback into the first few episodes, but I decided those are a little bit maybe too obscure. So I'm going to give you a Nickelback fact today, straight from Wikipedia. I'm just going to read it straight from Wikipedia, so here we go. The band was formed in the early 1990s as a cover band called Village Idiot by brothers Mike and Chad Kroeger with their cousin Brandon Kroeger and Ryan Peake. The band later changed its name to Nickelback, which originated from the nickel and change that band member Mike Kroeger gave customers at his job at Starbucks. He would frequently say, "Here's your Nickelback." So, a few things to unpack there. One, kind of a strange origin story for a band name. Two, can you imagine paying with cash at Starbucks? I feel so old that I remember I used to, but it's been probably a decade at least since I used cash at Starbucks to pay for anything like that, even to pay for my coffee drink. Three, the name of the band would be totally different if the band formed right now, because nobody pays for their coffee with cash anymore. You wouldn't be getting a Nickelback at Starbucks anymore. You'd be tipping $1 and just automatically doing that on your card. So the band name would be totally changed if the band had been formed right now. Maybe they'd still be Village Idiot. Maybe the name of this segment would have to be totally different too. Maybe we would call this Village Idiot as well. Food for thought. Thanks for joining me here today on Daily Delivery. We'll be back at it Wednesday. Chip Scoggins on the show. Looking forward to the rest of the week as well. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back at it on Wednesday.